let's be real. Raise your hand if you have ever received a message, channeling, a dream, a vision, received synchronicities, signs, or symbols, and been like, okay, awesome, but what the hell does that mean? We've definitely all experienced times where we wish the messages could be a little bit more straightforward, and it can be a source of frustration or confusion. Why do our guides have to be so enigmatic? If you raised your hand just like I did, then you are not alone. What does this mean is probably one of the number one questions I get when I'm working with people on an individual basis. Sometimes the messages that we get come through in a way that is not terribly clear, and it can send our minds spiraling in all kinds of directions as we try to sort out the purpose of the message and really what it is we're supposed to be doing with it. So, why do messages come through in the sort of strange roundabout way that they do sometimes? And what sorts of things can we do to help ourselves make sense out of the mystery that is the other side? Every person's sort of lexicon of symbology is going to be very individual for them personally. Signs, symbols, and imagery, it's sort of like a secret language between you and your guides and portions of inner self. I know that there are a lot of interpretation books out there, especially where dreams are concerned, and sometimes those things can be helpful in a kind of general sense. But it's important to keep in mind that every individual person is going to have their own upbringing, their own culture, their own socializations, and their own personal meanings associated with certain kinds of imagery. What do those types of things mean to you? If you're having dreams or seeing imagery of something like spiders, it's sort of, what is your relationship, and does it symbolize something creepy crawly that you don't want on you, a discomfortable feeling? Does it symbolize creativity and mastery of spinning, or is somebody spinning tails? The individual meaning of a particular kind of image is going to depend a lot on what your personal relationship is with that sort of imagery. But in any case, why would they be using imagery with you? Why use the symbology of a spider weaving its web, or maybe walking into spider webs, instead of just telling you to utilize your creativity or coming through in a more clear, direct manner? Communication on the other side, from their perspective, works very, very differently than it does here for us. After all, here I have a vocal cords and a mouth, and I create the sound vibration to come out of my mouth to convey things to you in the direct manner. It's what we're used to doing here in order to convey information. All communication on the other side is psychic communication, and they're not verbally making words and sending them to you. They communicate by radiating out the vibration of a meaning, the concept that they're trying to convey. And really, how we translate it is down to us, the person receiving the message, of what kinds of imagery that becomes in order for us to understand it, or what kinds of things we hear in order to put some kind of understanding on it. So, your angels and your guides, and even your own inner self, when communicating to the outer ego personality, is transmitting a knowing, or the vibration of a knowing. And the translations that we put on that are all things that are done on our end in order to help make sense out of the message. That having been said, they are master communicators, master emotional transmitters, and they know you really, really well. From their end of the conversation, you are emitting the kind of psychic vibration that they're used to translating all of the time as the standard way that they communicate. So everything about your current situation, everything about your life path, everything about your current emotional state is all immediately known to them in total concept format. For example, like when I'm working with another human in a dream state, like in my astral state, the minute I end up in the situation I'm called to, in the presence of another consciousness, everything that's pertinent about the situation is immediately known to me just from being in the vicinity, the energy space of another consciousness. So, as an example, when I was working with a gentleman in his dream space, when I arrived in his energy, he was just standing outside with a friend of his who was a dream construct. But the minute I entered into his little reality sphere that he was having the dream in, I got hit with a wall of information. In his case, he was feeling really upset and conflicted. Something in his life had been renewed or was carrying on, a contract or a job of some kind that everyone around him was really excited and happy about, celebrating. But on the inside, he had really hoped that it was over. He didn't want to continue doing it. He had to pretend to be happy with everyone else. He felt responsible for everyone else's feelings and didn't feel like he was capable of backing out of this situation at that time. And I just got this wall of feeling, that disappointing, crushing feeling of, I thought I was done, but now I have to do more of this. And it was just a really, really sticky energy. But when I stepped out in front of him, what I said to him was, you can fly if you try. And he looked at me and said, no, I really can't. I can't do it. And I said, no, you can. It's easy. Let me show you. And I kind of floated back a little bit and said, come on, give it a try. And so he tried floating a little bit and felt very excited about even the little bit of floating that he had done. Now, why say it to him like that? Why give him some enigmatic message in a dream that's not specifically, I suppose I could have just said, you don't have to be in situations you don't want to be in, but that's not how it came out. The truth was that particular gentleman had some pretty serious resistance, some energy blocks, reasons why he believed that he couldn't do what he wanted to do. For him, flying represents freedom, the ability to just fly away. And delivering the message in that way, he was willing to give it a try at least. Whereas if I had just told him what he needed to hear, he probably would have rejected the message. And I think any of you who are out there who ever do your craft or work with other people, giving advice, whether you do tarot or you do readings or however you use your gifts, have probably come across, even among family member and friends you're trying to give advice to, when you come across somebody who's got a serious energy block, they don't want to actually hear what you have to say. Communication can be pretty difficult. I think it can be really useful to know that sometimes when messages come through and they feel a little mysterious or they're not quite straightforward, sometimes those messages are being delivered by your guides or your angels, whoever is working with you, in a way that is helping to circumvent any energy blocks or resistances that you may have to a particular situation. I think it's a really useful way to look at it, because rather than the frustrated feeling of not understanding what a particular message means, we can kind of rest in the knowing that messages are delivered in the way that matches and works with the energy in the best way possible to make sure that we get around energy blockages or resistances to be able to deliver important messages and help them sink in a way that's more comfortable and won't be immediately rejected by the ego personality. Contrary-wise, sometimes being too direct with people can cause more problems than it's worth. And to share another example that's kind of embarrassing, this came from when I was training. I was working with another gentleman in his dream where he had a situation brewing with a partner, a significant other, and had created himself a dream space where internal communications, he was trying to work out some of that energy for himself in this scenario. But he was not receiving it well. He was starting to panic or freak out, so I ended up called into this situation to an assist. In my lack of experience and learning, I sort of tried to tell him the truth.
Listen, it's okay. This is a dream. You can work out the energy and make different choices so it doesn't manifest in this way for you.
But he freaked out completely, stared at me, started screaming and panicking, and it was one of those learning situations for me. My guides started kind of chuckling at me like, yeah, that's why we don't tell people. For the vast majority of people, those kinds of direct communications are too rough, and the energy is immediately rejected by the person interacting. Now, for a lot of us who do spiritual work consistently, direct messages do come in sometimes. A lot more comfortable with that scenario and that kind of energy, right? We're a little bit more used to it. But even so, on certain subjects or certain things, the messages might come through, as I said before, as an energy workaround to something maybe we have resistance or something we're working on. I think it's really important to remain balanced and humble as a spiritual person, as an energy worker, or as a channel, to remember that as much as we help other people, is we are still people that are growing and healing and learning ourselves. And so there's always going to be things that are energy blocks and resistances for us as well along the journey. Now, another thing that I'm going to bring up, which is the kind of the culprit sometimes of why things may not immediately make sense, is a little thing that we usually refer to as integration. For people who do a lot of inner work or a lot of spiritual type of work, some of the messages and the things that we get downloads on can be representative of much larger or more complex concepts. Integration is, you may hear it brought up in like maybe tarot readings you've heard, like take some time to let this integrate, or you may hear it in like when downloads are being talked about, like when your energy download integrates. It's a word that you hear out there sometimes, but it's really just means the internal processing it takes to build new symbolic understandings and new energy pathways for new bits of information, a new concept that's coming in. Integration can take some time, is because there's a lot of broader concepts, a lot of bigger knowing when doing spiritual work, and some of it is things that we as humans just don't have the words for, don't have any experience with, and it may be a completely new idea or concept for us. And bits and pieces of broader concepts may come in a little bit at a time over a longer period of time as individual pieces of it integrate so that the next step can be brought in. I think it can be really helpful also to keep in mind that our concept of time passing in the linear format that we're experiencing it here is very different from their idea of time that on the other side. So sometimes when we get an information or a bit of a message in, it can feel like a long time before the reason that it came in turns up in your experience. For example, like maybe a year ago now, I had them show up in my bedroom, the others or the guides, and pulled me out of my body and shot straight up through the ceiling and out past the earth and out into the stars. And as I started to panic over it, they said, "Don't worry, you'll be back. You're coming with us for a little while." And then I was immediately like right back in my bed. Now that scenario freaked me out a little bit. Like, what's up with the abduction scenario, guys? You know, it's not typical for them to just yank me out of my body and fly away. Like, it was a little abrupt. What did I do? But then I went back and re-looked through my log that I keep and realized that almost a year before that, I had taken a record of them sitting on a couch with them in another scenario, and one of them was telling me, like, "You're going to be coming to stay with us for a little while here pretty soon," and talked through the whole thing. So it ended up just being a training thing. I was going to go with them for a little while, but I had forgotten about it completely. Like, at the time it hadn't seemed important. I kept a log of it, but I didn't know what it meant and had forgotten about it completely. So that kind of leads to the first thing that we can really do to help make sense out of things, is to keep a record or some kind of log of it. Some people have a dream journal or a channeled messages journal, but when you get messages, experiences, dreams, synchronicities that show up, the more you can keep an accurate record of it, the easier it becomes to be able to go back and look over that record and be like, okay, actually there is a thread happening here. It's just happening over what seems to me like a long period of time. We humans got humaning to do here. So especially if you get a lot of messages or a lot of synchronicities are showing up, it's a good idea to just write them down and keep track of them so that when things do start to fall into place, you can pick up on the pattern that's there. It can also be helpful to be able to start picking out what some of the synchronicities or signs mean to you. So if you have a record of every time this thing shows up in my life, this was what was happening around at that time. And so it can help us pick up on the patterns of messages too that come through. And that sort of leads to the next thing that can be really helpful, is to begin for yourself deciding what your signs and symbols mean, what your imagery means for you. You can actually begin to decide on some of that stuff for yourself. Like, I'm going to decide that an eternity symbol, when I see it and it shows up, has this particular meaning. That way, when you have a clear picture in your mind of what signs and symbols you want to use for clear communication, then those signs and symbols will start showing up in the way that you're intending them to show up. In fact, if you spend time interacting with or watching people who do this a lot, like if you're watching the, what's the kid's name? Tyler Henry, the Hollywood medium, you'll see when he's doing it is he'll say things like, they're showing me my symbol for this, or they're showing me my symbol for that. And when this comes through, usually it means this. He has a very clear idea of what his symbology is to help facilitate communication swifter and faster when he's working with people live one-on-one. You can do the same process with your dream symbology. Really, the dream symbology and the kind of symbology you're getting through in channeled visions or hearing is going to be very similar. So you can decide, like, what does a bathroom mean to me? What does water mean to me in these scenarios? And so from that, when we have a clearer vision of what these signs and symbols mean to us, then the messages start to conform to our belief structure on what those things mean. Another thing that can be really helpful is to make sure that we're focusing on the feelings and impressions that we're getting off of this situation at the time that they're happening. The energy transference or psychic communication on the other side really is a vibrational kind of communication, and so the feeling of a situation may come through a lot clearer than the images that are being built up around the scenario. Following your own intuitions and feelings about what something means, even if you feel unsure, you're looking for validation, is usually just going to be more accurate and more authentic to your own internal symbology than anything anyone else is going to tell you about it. Now, that doesn't mean that it's never a thing to seek guidance or ask somebody who has experience in it, or watch tarot readings looking for the confirmation. Everybody does it. I do it. Just make sure, just like with anything else, that the messages that you're taking in from somebody else, that it resonates, that it makes sense for you, that it feels right. Believe me, my spiritual journey was a wild one, and I reached out to a lot of different practitioners asking for advice or input, but a lot of the time somebody else is going to filter what you're telling them through their own lenses of understanding, through their own practices, through their own dogmas and beliefs. And I can't tell you the number of times that I got told things from other people that just didn't resonate or feel right with what I was receiving or what I was feeling from the situation. But it never hurts to seek guidance or wisdom from somebody else who may know, but never internalize anything or any interpretation of your experiences that doesn't feel right or doesn't resonate for you. Thank you for being here. That's what I got on how to sort of navigate the muddy waters of messages that come through sometimes. Drop a comment and let me know if you have other practices and things you do to help sort out your messages. I love to hear them. Thank you again for being here. I appreciate it so much. Like, subscribe, all of that fun stuff, and I will see you guys next time.